On the American frontier, love did not usually arrive with violins, roses, or easy promises. It arrived with dust on its boots. It came in the form of a stranger helping mend a broken wagon wheel, a woman sharing hot coffee with a man who had ridden 20 miles through snow, a letter folded 3 times and carried across the plains, a neighbor arriving with 2 oxen when the roof beams were too heavy to lift alone. Out in the Wild West, single men and women often lived far apart, scattered across open land where a nearest neighbor might be a half-day's ride away. The frontier was wide, lonely, and unforgiving. A person could spend sunrise to sunset cutting sod, hauling water, mending fences, milking cows, feeding chickens, or guarding animals from weather and wolves. And in that world, marriage was not only romance, it was survival. A frontier couple did not begin with a wedding dress and a comfortable home. More often, they began with a claim, a cabin, a few tools, a borrowed milk cow, and a future that looked impossible from the outside. Yet from those difficult beginnings came some of the most enduring partnerships in American rural history. Because on the frontier, love was proven in labor. A man could speak kindly, but could he stack hay before a storm? A woman could be admired for her beauty, but could she keep a cow alive through a hard winter? Could two people wake before dawn, work until their hands cracked, argue over money, forgive each other by supper, and still believe the farm was worth building? That was the test. For many single settlers, especially in the Great Plains, the mountains, and the cattle country of the West, courtship happened under conditions that would seem strange today. There were few dances, few parlors, and few long evenings of leisure. A young man might meet a woman at a church gathering, a schoolhouse supper, a harvest crew, a general store, or while helping another family during branding season. Sometimes they met because of animals. A loose horse would wander onto a neighboring claim. A cow would break through a fence. A bull would be borrowed for breeding. A team of oxen would be shared between two struggling homesteads. In a place where animals were wealth, transportation, food, and labor, livestock often became the reason neighbors met in the first place. Imagine a young woman standing beside a muddy corral, trying to pull a milk cow away from a half-frozen trough. Her gloves are wet, her boots are sinking into the yard. A rider appears on the road, stops, and says nothing grand or poetic. He simply steps down, grabs the rope, and helps. That might be the beginning of a frontier marriage. Not a ball, not a grand romance, just two people, a stubborn cow, and the sudden knowledge that life is easier when someone pulls beside you. For single men, the frontier could be brutally lonely. Many had come west with a dream of land, cattle, or independence, only to discover that a claim was not a finished farm. It was grass, wind, debt, and endless repair. A man alone might build a dugout or a rough cabin, but keeping it running was another matter. He had to cook, wash, cut fuel, tend animals, mend harness, plant crops, watch the weather, and somehow earn cash. For single women, the frontier offered hardship, but also a surprising measure of independence. Some filed land claims in their own names, some ran boarding houses, taught school, kept chickens, sold butter, or managed small herds. A woman who knew how to handle animals had real value on a frontier farm. Chickens gave eggs, cows gave milk, pigs turned scraps into meat, sheep gave wool. A careful woman could turn a few animals into steady income. So when single people chose each other, they were not just choosing affection. They were choosing a working partner. Many frontier marriages began with letters. A man might place an advertisement in a newspaper describing himself as honest, sober, landholding, and in need of a wife. A woman from the East, the Midwest, or even overseas might answer. Their correspondence could last months. They would trade descriptions of land, character, religion, habits, hopes, and fears. The phrase mail-order bride is often misunderstood today. Some matches were practical arrangements, yes, but many were also emotional risks taken by people with few options and great courage. A woman did not simply step into a fantasy, she stepped into uncertainty. She might travel by train, wagon, or stage to meet a man she knew only from handwriting, and when she arrived, the truth waited in plain sight. Was his cabin real, or had he exaggerated? Did he own cattle, or only dream of them? Was the land fertile, or dry and lonely? Was he kind when disappointed? Did he treat his animals with patience, or with anger? On the frontier, animals revealed character quickly. A cruel man could not hide it long around a nervous horse. A lazy man could not hide it when the cow bawled at milking time and the woodpile stood empty. A careless woman could not hide it when chickens went unfed, butter spoiled, or lambs froze in a drafty shed. But when two people found respect, a farm could become the language of love. A newly married couple might begin with almost nothing, perhaps one cow, 6 hens, a rooster, and a lean horse. The cow was often the center of their survival. Milk could be drunk fresh, skimmed for cream, churned into butter, or traded in town. Butter money mattered. Egg money mattered. A few coins from a basket of eggs could buy salt, coffee, lamp oil, calico, nails, or medicine. The chickens were small, but they were powerful. They scratched through manure, cleaned up spilled grain, laid eggs, and multiplied. Pigs were even more practical. They ate scraps, roots, windfall apples, sour milk, and garden waste. A pig pen could turn household leftovers into winter meat. Sheep offered wool and, in some regions, meat and trade. Goats, though less prestigious, could survive on rough forage where cattle struggled. Every animal had a purpose, and every animal gave the couple another chance to survive. But animal farming in the Wild West was not gentle work. It was mud, smell, noise, loss, and constant attention. A cow had to be milked whether the couple was tired, sick, angry, or snowed in. Chickens had to be shut away before predators came. Horses needed grooming, feed, and water. Pigs broke fences. Sheep wandered. Calves had to be watched. Hay had to be cut, cured, hauled, and stacked before winter. Romance did not replace labor. It lived inside it. A husband might show love by rising early to break ice on the water trough before his wife came out to milk. A wife might show love by keeping a lantern burning in the barn when her husband rode home late from town. They might not speak tender words every hour. Frontier people often had little time for that. But they spoke through chores completed, meals shared, animals saved, and debts endured. There were arguments, of course. A couple might fight over whether to buy another cow or repair the roof, whether to sell a heifer or keep her for breeding, whether to risk money on sheep when the neighbors warned that coyotes would take them, whether chickens belonged in the garden or outside the fence, whether a stubborn mule was worth feeding one more winter. Money was always thin. Weather could ruin everything. A hailstorm could flatten a crop in minutes. A blizzard could bury fences. Drought could turn grass to dust. Disease could sweep through animals before a family understood what was happening. And still, many couples stayed. They stayed because the farm was more than land. It was proof that their partnership could make life where none had existed before. In the first year, a frontier couple might sleep in a room that was also kitchen, bedroom, and storage shed. Their animals might have better shelter than they did because losing a cow could mean losing the farm. The barn might come before the finished house. Fence posts might come before curtains. A chicken coop might be patched while the cabin still leaked. To outsiders, this could look foolish, but frontier couples understood something practical. Animals were a living bank. A cow could produce calves, hens could produce chicks, sheep could produce wool and lambs, pigs could produce litters. A small beginning, carefully protected, could become abundance. That transformation is one of the great hidden stories of the homesteading West. The poor couple who arrived with one wagon could, after years of discipline, stand beside a barn full of hay, a yard full of chickens, a smokehouse stocked for winter, and a pasture dotted with calves. Not because luck had smiled on them every season, but because they had learned how to make every creature count. Women were often central to this success. On many farms, the so-called small animals were under a woman's management. Chickens, ducks, geese, milk cows, butter, cream, eggs, and garden produce could form the steady economy of the household. A man might be praised for fields and cattle. but the farm often survived on the daily, quiet production managed near the house and barnyard. Egg money could carry a family through weeks when crops brought no income. Butter could be traded when cash was scarce. A good milk cow could mean the difference between hunger and endurance. A woman who understood animals was not merely helping, she was building the farm's foundation. Men, too, carried heavy burdens. Breaking land, cutting timber, digging wells, building barns, hauling freight, branding cattle, and guarding stock required strength and stamina. A husband might ride in bitter weather to find a missing cow because that cow represented months of food. He might sleep in the barn during calving season. He might work for wages on another ranch, then come home to repair his own fences by moonlight. The frontier couple lived between exhaustion and hope. Their marriage was tested by both. But the animals also brought tenderness into a hard world. A newborn calf wobbling under its mother could soften a silent morning. A basket of warm eggs could feel like victory. A lamb saved from a storm could become a story told for years. A horse that carried one spouse safely home could be loved almost like family. In a place where loss was common, every living creature that made it through winter felt like a promise. Courtship often continued after marriage in these small acts. A husband might bring home a better rooster because he knew his wife wanted stronger chicks. A wife might save coins from butter sales to buy her husband a new harness strap. Together they might stand at a livestock auction, whispering over whether they could afford a second cow. Their hands might brush over a fence rail, not in grand drama, but in shared decision. This was frontier romance. Not soft, but deep. Not easy, but earned. Neighbors sometimes doubted new couples. They laughed at young brides from the city who did not yet know how to milk. They mocked men who let their wives manage accounts or choose breeding stock. They shook their heads at couples who started with goats, geese, or pigs instead of proper cattle. In rural communities, everyone watched everyone else, and failure was noticed quickly. But mockery could turn to respect. The city bride learned the cow's rhythm. The shy husband learned to trust his wife's judgment. The couple who bought scrawny animals cheap nursed them into a healthy herd. The pair who built a low, ugly barn from salvaged boards watched it stand through storms that damaged prettier buildings. Frontier success often belonged to people willing to look foolish at first. Love helped them survive that ridicule, because when the town laughed, they still had each other. When relatives back east doubted them, they still had the land beneath their feet. When the first winter nearly broke them, they still had the morning chores, and chores have a way of forcing people forward. You cannot give up entirely when the cow needs milking. You cannot collapse when the hens need feed. You cannot stay in bitterness when a fence is down and the pigs are loose. The farm demanded movement, and movement kept hope alive. Over time, the couple's relationship became woven into the landscape. The barn remembered their first winter. The corral remembered their first calf. The chicken house remembered the spring when egg money paid the tax. The pasture remembered the horse that carried them through hard years. Every improvement became a chapter of marriage. A gate hung straight. A roof no longer leaked. A herd grew. A garden expanded. A smokehouse filled. A second room was added to the cabin. Then maybe a porch. Then shade trees. Then a proper barn door with iron hinges. From the outside, it looked like a farm becoming successful. From the inside, it was a marriage becoming seasoned. But the Wild West was never as simple as romance and hard work. The land many settlers claimed had deep histories before them. Native peoples had lived, hunted, farmed, and traveled across these regions long before homesteads, fences, and private claims divided the open country. The growth of frontier farms came with conflict, displacement, and painful change. Any honest story of the West must remember that one person's beginning could be another people's loss. Still, within the individual lives of ordinary settlers, the animal farm was often a dream of safety. Many had come from poverty, crowded towns, rented farms, or uncertain labor. To own land and animals was to imagine control over tomorrow. A cow in the barn, hens in the yard, pigs in the pen, and hay in the loft meant a couple had built something that might carry them through. And for single people who had once faced the frontier alone, that shared security was powerful. Marriage did not erase loneliness immediately. Two strangers, even married ones, had to learn each other. Some couples who met by letter discovered affection slowly, after awkward beginnings. Love might grow while digging potatoes, pulling a calf, washing mud from harness, or sitting quietly after a long day while the animals settled outside. They learned the sound of each other's footsteps. They learned who worried about storms. They learned who was brave with sick animals and who was better with numbers. They learned when to speak and when silence was kinder. In time, a farm could turn strangers into partners, and partners into something stronger than either had expected. The animals were always there, marking the seasons. Spring brought births, mud, and new grass. Summer brought flies, heat, and haying. Autumn brought butchering, trading, storing, and counting what could be spared. Winter brought frozen buckets, hungry stock, and long nights of listening to wind press against the walls. Each season asked the same question: can you endure together? The couples who answered yes did not always become rich. Many remained modest farmers all their lives. But wealth on the frontier was not always measured in money. Sometimes it was measured in a full milk pail, a sound roof, a team of horses strong enough to plow, a flock of hens scratching in the sun, a wife and husband standing shoulder to shoulder at the barn door, looking at land that had once seemed empty and seeing home. That is why animal farms became such a powerful part of frontier marriage. They gave love something practical to build. They turned affection into food, wool, milk, eggs, shelter, trade, and community. They forced cooperation. They punished neglect. They rewarded patience. They made every day meaningful because every day something living depended on the couple's care. And perhaps that is the most important truth. In the Wild West, love was not proven by escape from hardship. It was proven by staying through it. A single man and a single woman might begin as strangers on opposite sides of a lonely territory. They might meet through a letter, a church supper, a runaway cow, a borrowed horse, or a neighbor's harvest. They might marry with little more than hope and a few animals between them. But if they worked together, if they learned the land, if they protected their stock, if they forgave the failures of bad seasons, they could build something remarkable: a homestead, a herd, a household, a future. And when the sun dropped behind the barn and the animals quieted, and the last pail of milk was carried inside, the story of that couple was written not in grand speeches, but in the ordinary miracle of survival. Two people who had once been alone had made a living world together. On the frontier, that was love, and sometimes that was enough to tame the wildest place on earth.